Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joined as always by the Rocky to my Bullwinkle, or the Bullwinkle to my Rocky. I'm not sure which it is, but hey there, Brian. How you doing? I'm one Mr. Brian E. Roach. What's going on?
Well, I would venture to say that if we stick to the traditional height-based roles, you are the moose and I am the squirrel.
Oh, well, gee, Rocky, that doesn't bode too well for me. So, well, Brian, coronavirus or not, we're here. Sometimes it's more of a struggle for us to just fight sometimes to get on the same schedule and stuff. So we're trying to stick with everyone. We'll always be here twice a week, but you know what? When it comes to some NFL news and things that are going on, and right now we're in uncertain times. We don't know, there's no baseball, hockey, or basketball or anything else. So we hope at least that we'll entertain you and keep you apprised. Me and Brian are both in quarantine boxes away from each other, so that's all good. We're not breathing on each other, coughing on each other, or anything like that. I joke, yes. I joke, I kid. I really don't know what to think of this thing. I don't know if it's a laughing matter or not. I guess we won't know until we look back on this, sometime in the future when it's, come and gone and everything like that. But for right now, the NFL, I mean, you're talking about the NFL season. I know they canceled the annual owners meeting. Okay, you don't necessarily want to go into a big public area like airports or maybe do any type of flying or anything like that. Really, the owners and guys and they just it's unnecessary. I think some of this, like somebody said, coronavirus is really going to test what really could have just been an email rather than a meeting, right? But aside from that, the NFL hasn't made any major statements on moving much of anything. The only thing that's really affecting football right now, because it's the offseason, I think a lot of things could be done remote. I think a lot of things are done via phone call, maybe even fax machines. I'm sure they still, scan paperwork, send it however they do digitally and things of that nature. So I expect, business is going to pick up when it comes to, we're supposed to be getting close here. We're supposed to get a vote, yes or no, on the CBA. We're supposed to be getting any kind of indication on, and then from there, they keep bumping the franchise tag thing. The start of the new league year is right around the corner here too, and I think the only other thing that's really affected by this is whether or not players, they fail a physical. And I read somewhere where they were talking about typically they might fly them into their own facilities. So the Steelers are interested in some free agent, right? And, he pass, fail, physical, or whatever, they want to bring them to their facilities. I think that's the real thing that's going to be hampered in this process. Otherwise, I think everything will be business as usual because, unlike, baseball was ready to start here at the beginning of April, NBA and NHL were, they're in the home stretch and ready to go into the postseason. So it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening. March Madness is pretty much, looks like it might not happen, and that's a shame for, my team's Dayton right now, Brian. I mean, they're third in the country. So, they're having an amazing year. Their first All-American in like 41 years with Obi Toppin and stuff like that. And you're seeing all this stuff happen. But for all the folks that, I don't think there's any reason to have any type of I hate using words like hysteria and panic, but what else can we say right now? There's a lot of unknowns. So there's not going to be, I don't think, any knee-jerk reactions for the NFL right now because they're not looking at anything until July and August when you start getting into training camps and getting into preseason games and stuff of that nature.
Yeah, I think the majority of what you're likely to see is that pre-draft visits will get cut down, that, visits to pro days, if they're not canceled, will get cut down. Things that require lengthy travel in a plane, they may decide to forego. But the impact is going to be less substantial for the NFL right now than any of the other leagues because they're basically inactive. They still have this pre-draft and the draft coming up. And then really, I think that's the big question on everybody's mind from the standpoint of the NFL is depending on how this plays out, is the draft going to even go off? And when you think about it, there's no reason it couldn't, because they could do the entire draft through remote, if they had to. They don't desperately need everyone in the same room. But, are they going to allow the fans in? They've got this all planned for Vegas, baby. And, is that gonna be a problem? Look,
yes,
yes,
maybe. I mean, we're talking about, it's still a month away.
Still a month away.
Yeah, so there's time.
But, everybody is saying the same things, which is it's going to get worse before it gets better. And that is going to be true. The flip side of that is, for the vast majority of people who contract it or, contract this thing, they're going to recover. It's the people who are immunocompromised and the elderly that are at the most at risk. And that's, it's unfortunate, but, the problem is since we're inundated with it 24/7, 7 days a week right now, because every news channel has to scare us to the bejesus out of us. Look, if you're not running to the bathroom all the time with explosive, whatnot, and you're not coughing and sick and have a fever, you're probably okay.
Well, yeah, and you know what? You're talking about every news channel. It's like we somehow inserted it into our podcast, and we're working strictly on SEO here, folks. I mean, we're not going to overdo it. It'll probably be the only thing that mentions it whatsoever on our site, unless some other thing happens. And we're not going to this is what's going to happen, Brian. There's going to be like a tweet, and it's going to say so and so happens to be on the roster has contracted this thing, or multiple so and so's. If it's multiple so and so's, some of these websites will have an article for each guy, even though it'll be in the same tweet. What we're at 280 characters.
Breaking.
Now. What's that?
Breaking as we are on the recording this. All Steelers scouting personnel and coaches who had been on the road have returned home. This is via Ray Fittipaldo. There are no plans to travel for the next couple of days, per Burt Lawton, as the team continues to evaluate the COVID-19 outbreak. So there you go.
Yeah, well, Jerry Dulac just did the same. So getting it from both angles. Same. They work for the same paper, right? I believe.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. But I was just kind of making fun of. There was one of the Steelers websites, as I put it lightly. There's people with like less credentials and what do you want to say? What else? Degrees or anything else that you want to say? Experience, you name it all. Like very much, they're just bloggers, and there was one website, there was I think they have 6 boxes that are up front on their homepage, like the big call out things. And I think one of them's like a podcast, and that didn't say coronavirus, but 4 of the other 5 did, that were actual articles. I'm like, how much more can you stretch out of this? Okay, we know, I don't think we have to tell anybody that the podcast here is going to continue because of coronavirus, because it's all, we're not going into giant public spaces to be able to do this type of thing. And the same thing with any type of blogging or whatever. It's like oftentimes I'm writing articles sometimes from home with a laptop in my lap, sitting on the couch with my feet up, and maybe the Pens game, which there won't be any of those anytime soon, but something like that going on in the background. So it's a little bit of it's like really silly. We were making fun of that. Was that Mike Florio and Pro Football Talk?
Yeah.
Who called him out? Jeff Schwartz, who has some really good. I want to call Jeff Schwartz like some hot takes, but his takes, like, they're on the blunt / realistic kind of take spectrum there, where they're not necessarily hot or lukewarm or cold or anything like that. And he called him out for just wanting some attention. And I got to say the same thing. Like, when you're posting like 4 or 5 articles about coronavirus on your own website of, you may have a band of 5 to 10 people that are doing this, and no different than what we're doing, except we have actual journalists with degrees and people with press credentials and things of that nature. Yeah, we get in the press box and stuff like that sometimes too, but it's just like one of those things where, okay, I don't think we were worried that this was going to disappear or something, unless you actually get sick, me or you get sick from it. And then, even then, if I'm sick, I'm probably still talking to a microphone, as long as I don't put anybody else at risk. So that was, that segues into the whole point of this whole show, is the pet peeves. And you're talking about being, just bombarded with this, coronavirus stuff 24/7. And that's kind of like why we maybe kicked off with that. It is one of the pet peeves that's going on. And another one is like, if you were to speak with Captain Obvious. If you happen to meet him, it would be very obvious if you did that, the Steelers Steelers, well, that could get interesting later on too, but everybody's talking about the Steelers offseason and all these other things and a lot of moves, and it's going to get real interesting real soon, and I just want to beat someone over the head with one of those rubber whack-a-mole mallets and say, well, gee, you think? Because if the CBA thing gets decided and then you end up, then you end up going to have a lot of activity because you got a lot of deadlines that got to happen real quick. And, some of these things that we see on various places on social media, Facebook, the Facebook groups, oh, man. Some of you may see my name floating around there sometimes because I just can't help myself. I like to bite my tongue sometimes, but some of these things are just so, stupid that I can't help myself, but sometimes I just don't because there's a few usual suspects out there. We usually make fun of them during the mock draft time in the season. Oh, we will be able to make fun of that actually. We'll just have to track one of these down. That'll be a pet peeve for later in the show, Brian. But it's you know, all these people are talking about, well, I guess the big one is Bud Dupree. And it's re-sign, don't sign. We had a whole show on it. And I just kind of get sick. I kind of roll my eyes at the big one is people are trying to make these fantasy football general manager decisions because Andrew Filipponi, who, talk about hot takes. Oh, they should
never right.
Yeah, they should. From the Fan Morning Show. What is it? 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh. If any of you aren't familiar with the radio station there, and Andrew Filipponi said something about a sign and tag with Bud Dupree, and I wanted to bang my head against the desk, okay, you're trying to get he said a second round draft pick. Brian, is there anybody out there that's realistically, I know people want pass rushers. They put a premium on them. But if you're putting a franchise tag on the guy, that means he's one of the top paid based on the top five. It's a percentage based on the top five guys at that position, which means it's an expensive rental for 1 year. And if you can't get an agreement in advance or anything like that, and what would you be willing to trade? People are trying to trade Bud Dupree, who isn't under contract, by the way, for a first round pick or a second round pick. And I just don't see it. If they weren't going to be able to get a deal, then just let him leave. You know what I mean? Or if you end up signing him, he said he wants to play. He's going to be paid handsomely. I don't see him pulling a Le'Veon Bell deal here and sitting out. In all rightfulness, he could, but I just don't get the whole here, we're going to pencil this in, move this around. You said you were watching Draft Day the other day. What do you think?
I think that the idea that you're going to get anything of value in a sign and trade on a transition tag or a franchise tag for Bud Dupree is ludicrous. First of all, what is the value you're receiving? A second round pick? For those of you who think you're getting a first round pick, you can continue to dream on that. Nobody's giving up a first round pick for a guy that they can't guarantee is going to be on their team for that period of time. You're saying I'm going to spend this money for 1 year instead of getting a 4-year rookie that I can maybe even keep for the 5th year. No, they're not going to do that. It's ludicrous. So now you're talking maybe at best a second round pick. Well, now you got a guy who's never played on your team before, and this ain't a great edge rusher class. So who are you getting that's going to come in and be able to produce the productivity that Bud Dupree has done? It's just, look, everybody, I don't quite understand the mentality of everybody that jumps on these different sides of the Bud. I mean, we've beaten it to death. Look, you can listen to the folks who say, "Oh, Bud has been some." I don't want to say nasty things about the human being.
B word. They think he's Bust Dupree and not Bud Dupree.
Well, they related him to Jarvis Jones, which I'm sorry is moronic. That's just moronic. He's been much more productive than Jarvis Jones ever was. Bust is not something I would term with Bud Dupree. He has progressed every year. Yes. Has it been slower than we wanted to? Yes. But again, when they drafted him, they knew he was a project. He was one of those freak athletes.
He's a first rounder. He's a first rounder. He should be an instant All-Pro and future Hall of Famer.
Somebody with time might want to go back and look at all the first rounders and find out how many of them actually were all pros and Hall of Famers, because a lot of them weren't. It's ludicrous. You don't hit on every one, obviously. But the thing is, sometimes you take a flyer based on the physical traits that are exhibited by a player. And that's what they did on Bud Dupree. They thought he was going to go higher than he was. They were surprised he was there, and they took a shot. They knew it was going to take time for him to develop. And they had James Harrison still at the time. They had other guys, so they knew they could probably take the time to develop him. So now that that's all paying off, you guys want to jump ship?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Well, that's it. Like a year ago, everybody was like, "Hey, get rid of this guy. Why are we paying him $11 million?" And I don't know. I think some people just stick to some things like that. Maybe they're just. I don't know about you, Brian. My opinion can be changed. Okay, I'm not going to force down anybody's throat that Dante Moncrief should be brought back and everything like that. I thought he could have been good. I sincerely thought he was hurt. He was a casualty of the whole compensatory pick deal where, the Steelers got another third rounder. I don't know. Was that before the last show? We may not have announced that yet, but if you didn't know, Steelers have a third round pick now. The original one to Denver, right? With the part of the Devin Bush trade still from last year to move up 10 picks and get him. And that was another thing. It was like, they need to find a guy. I'll get in a few of those things in a little bit. Jarvis Jones was literally benched. I mean, now he got hurt in his second year. I really thought he might come around. And then guess what? The Steelers kind of, saw the forest for the trees here. The guy, I was actually inactive at one point. I want to say he was largely responsible for the Dallas Cowboys and Ezekiel Elliott running all over the Steelers several years ago at Heinz Field. That's not Bud Dupree. And people like to throw out, well, here PFF has him as, 26th in whatever coverage. Okay, I'm going to throw this out for you. There's 32 NFL teams. Everybody doesn't play a 3-4 necessarily, but if you just say there's 32 outside linebackers and he's 26th in something, that means he's not dead last in the league. And guess what? He has a teammate in TJ Watt that's probably somewhere higher up on the chart or in the same position in many of the rankings, right? So you have two guys that are in the top 32 when there's, in theory, 32 starting outside linebackers, or 64, I should say, if you were to double that number up.
64 would be more accurate.
Yeah, so the guy's in the top third. Like, come on, man. I mean, it just says, okay, he's not number one. I'm sorry. He doesn't get the gold star sticker for doing a good job today from, Pro Football Focus and all of their wizards and, quote, gurus. But Jarvis Jones in 50 games as a Pittsburgh Steeler, 50 games, had sixer, in case this is going over CB radio, six sacks in his career, 6 sacks. And Bud has 31.5 in 70. Yeah, I understand that he had 6 in one season alone. He had more in his first 2 seasons than Jarvis Jones did in 4. The comparison is just terrible. I feel bad for this guy. He has to go on social media and see all this filth.
Yeah, I just want to say, you have to understand the way that a player like this grows, and you have to be able to look at that progression. And now you wonder if some of these folks who are now like, well, he wasn't great for 4 years. Now he had a 1 year. Let's get rid of him because we can get something for him. What do you do with your kids? I mean, how many of your kids came out of the womb and spoke 7 languages and were geniuses at algebra? I don't think any. It takes time to develop stuff. These guys take time in the league. God, it's like, have we just forgotten patience? I think we have.
Well, you could go back to the previous show or one of the previous shows where we really boil that down. If you missed it, I go through, I don't know, about 4 or 5 Steelers outside linebackers that had as slow of a start, and then some other guys that were around the league, all the time. So, it's one of those things. I'm going to get off Bud Dupree since we've talked about him enough. there's some major decisions, Brian, big decisions that got to be made about Vance McDonald and Ramon Foster and Anthony Chickillo and Mark Barron and, Mike Hilton and Zach Banner, and I don't know, for some reason somebody didn't bring up Matt Filer in the whole list, even though he's the starting right tackle and he just got paid, believe it or not, out of the performance-based pay distributions which were also announced. Brian, you may have glossed over this. Man, we got all kinds of things. This is like breaking news here. NCAA tournament's off. No March Madness. So, yeah, that's that's sad, when you have somebody that isn't, hasn't been a perennial powerhouse like a Dayton and some of these other teams. And they really brought my love back to college basketball. I hadn't been watching for, really consistently for years, and now it's all done. That kind of sucks. But anyways, Matt Filer, third on the list of the top 25 combined distributions on performance-based pay and the veteran pool. This is money that's set aside for guys, I don't know how in-depth I want to get into this because there's a big, long paragraph about it, but it's basically it's their performance during the 2019 season. It's a program that's collectively bargained to benefit that compensates all players, including rookies, based on their playing time and salary levels. So congratulations to Matt Filer there. I hope someone recognizes that, something has to be done with him long-term as well. So, and, other people are talking about, like with BJ Finney, he's an unrestricted free agent. But let me get back to the rest of this list. Vance McDonald's under contract. The only reason his name ever comes up, and we had an entire show almost dedicated to this too, is because some of the gurus that are out there are trying to, once again, play the fantasy general manager and figure out who all can you cut in order to, find some change in the couch and this and that in order to sign Bud Dupree. And we're sitting over here like, hey, nobody's making any big moves because they're trying to figure out what this CBA is going to be all about and if it's going to go through. And if you start to make those tough decisions, which we went over before, you end up having to replace a starting tight end. You don't even have Nick Vannett, who was the other tight end. He's going to be a free agent. I don't know, like people tend to forget about these things. It's like there's other guys, you know what I mean? Why are we trying to get rid of the guys that are already under contract and then have to not only replace them, but replace some of the others that are like their backups? Ramon Foster, there's not really a backup for him because BJ Finney, who also plays backup center, more than likely, he's not going to be able to be retained. So you get rid of Foster, now you're another offensive lineman, and maybe you'll move Filer over to guard. I don't know. Then you got to find a tackle, and there's a lot of moving parts there. We talked about Mark Barron and whether or not he could be expendable. I mean, it depends looking on the depth chart. A year ago, you're still trying to find the replacement for Ryan Shazier, and you saw how some things didn't work out. And Barron actually played significantly more in 2019 than Vince Williams did, but you have both of them and, Devin Bush entering his second year. After that, do you feel comfortable with Ulysses Gilbert, or if they brought back Tyler Matakevich real cheap? If you got rid of Mark Barron and then you had Devin Bush and Vince Williams as your starters, that's fine and dandy. I don't have a problem with that. But what happens if one of those guys goes down? Like, you may have more of a problem with that. And I've been tough on Mark Barron, but I could see one of these things CBA goes through. He has 1 year left on his deal. It's just a matter of what money you could save on the cap. And that's why his name comes up. Otherwise, his name shouldn't come up at all, in my opinion. Anthony Chickillo's contract is a little rich for a guy who barely sees the field. That one is actually legit. That one is legit. And then you got to figure out, I don't think like Mike Hilton and some of these other guys are top priority just yet. And seeing as they're restricted instead of unrestricted free agents, the Steelers still have some options to exercise in terms of matching deals made, offer sheet by another team, whatever they tender these guys as, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to all move at a very fast pace. But if you think these guys are just sitting there at a desk making paper airplanes and shooting them around the room, though, they're probably stowed away in a safe or somewhere else. They probably have this all figured out. They may even have like a backup plan of a yes and no, because I think you got to be prepared whether or not the CBA goes through or not.
Absolutely. There's a lot of uncertainty because of the fact that the CBA has not been ratified yet, and they need to know what that situation is going to be, because that's how they're going to have to make determinations. If suddenly the salary cap goes up, 20% because of the CBA. I'm pulling that number out of where.
Yeah.
But if it goes up a considerable amount, guess what? They have some freedom to do some things. If it doesn't, or if it doesn't get ratified by the time the league year starts and they have to start making tough decisions, well, then that's a different story. Look, as you said, the legit choice there is Anthony Chickillo. Some have questioned how he managed to stay around for as long as he has, because while he does get playing time, doesn't do a whole lot with it. And that's unfortunate. Look, he was a Joey Porter project. Joey Porter fell in love with him, thought he could turn him into something. It didn't work out that way, but he's been a consistent depth player. He hasn't looked outclassed, but he also isn't doing anything dramatic to draw your attention to him. Ramon Foster is a maybe in my mind. It's a bigger contract, and he's an aging player. But if you keep him around, you keep him around, because, as you said, BJ Finney is likely gone. And while they might be able to move Matt Filer over to guard and hope that somebody like Chooks or Zach Banner, who threw out his own tweet the other day that was somewhat, depressing.
Yeah.
One of these guys can pick up the slack, but you just don't know whether you're going to be forced to do those things yet. And until the CBA is either, passed or not passed, they're not going to know how to proceed. If their priority is, as we've talked about, keeping Bud, they got to find the money to do that. And once they've done that, that may entail cutting. But the likelihood of cutting Mark Barron, I think, is slim. The likelihood of not picking up the option on Vance McDonald, in my mind, is none.
No, I
There's
agree.
no way they're not
you.
doing that. There's just no way.
Yeah, they can't. They literally can't afford to do it. And once again, go back in the archives there, because we talked ad nauseum about all what these tight ends are getting paid in the NFL. So.
Yep.
And do you really want to roll with a? So for what you're saving, I think you're saving $4.5 million on the cap for Vance McDonald. That's about what Darren Fells is getting paid, and he's like 34 years old or something now. I mean, but the Texans, and he had like the one decent season this year. He found he found a role with the Houston Texans. But geez, oh man, I mean. It's one of those things. And again, it's like finding starting caliber players in the NFL. It's like you can't have superstars at every position, but I think a lot of people are down on Vance. Once again, we talked about this. He played the most snaps of anyone that wasn't on the offensive line. Usually the next guy in line in that statement or that supersedes one of those five starters on the line is a quarterback, which did not happen this year. And then maybe even one of the wide receivers in the past had played more than one of the tight ends. It was Vance McDonald. He was actually more on the field more than what most people probably realize. So I'm going to pull this one back up too, since we're still talking about Dupree and we're talking about contracts and cap hits and things of this nature. Someone had asked Mark Cabali about this. About a solid week ago, and they said, can the Steelers afford to sign Bud Dupree to a long-term deal and then do that with Watt next year? That doesn't seem possible or even a smart thing to do. We won't address the smart part, but we will address the rest of it. Cabali had answered, it does seem crazy, right? How in the world can a team that is so tight against the cap be able to afford potentially $70 million for Dupree and $90 million for Watt, especially with Hayward and Tuitt getting paid and Fitzpatrick and Bush due for raises soon? They can afford them. First, whenever the new CBA gets ratified, whether it is in a week or a year, the influx of money is going to be great, thus increasing the salary cap significantly. We're talking $230 million as early as next year. Some reports even as much as $240, Brian. That's just my personal added note to that. He continues, plus, when you sign these two, the money will be down the line a little where the Steelers won't be on the hook for $35 million of cap space for your franchise quarterback. What they mean is these deals for Dupree and Watt are going to be, let's say, 4 or 5 year contracts, I would think, in my mind, which may outlast Ben Roethlisberger's tenure with the Steelers, which then means you probably got somebody cheaper. Even if you re-sign Mason Rudolph in 2 years, based on he would have to have like some all-pro year to become a $30 million quarterback. He's probably going to be like a $6 or $8 million guy at best, especially if you're rolling with him as a starter, unless perhaps you end up drafting somebody or even some other comparable veteran. probably half price. What have I said on here before? The great value brand versus the name brand, right? That's what you're looking at. So you could afford to throw the money on the other side of the football because you're not paying Ben Roethlisberger, second highest paid quarterback in the NFL, I think, for his salary coming up in 2020. So, and Kabali has one last note here. He goes, one last thing. They currently have about $32 million worth of contracts through the 2022 season, so they could shape this team any way they want moving forward. So a resounding yes, they could easily afford both and much more after that. $32 million in 2022. We're talking about 230 plus in 2021. So even if the cap didn't move up at all in 2022, that's $200 million worth of space they got in 2 years. That's an overwhelming amount of money. So, all the mass hysteria and panic and everything, which is probably, more than the coronavirus deal over Vance McDonald, Ramon Foster, Chicolo, Barron, any of the other guys. Stop it. Just stop it. We'll wait and see. And, I pretty much anything I see the Steelers do or any movement they make on any of these names or in any of these directions, I understand it's going to be a business decision, but you can't do business until you know how you're going to be able to do business. And that plan has yet to have a yay or nay stamp of approval on it.
Yep, that's just the way it is.
Yep, just the way it is. What else we got, man? Why don't we do this one while we got it right here? Not realizing who actually is unrestricted free agents, restricted free agents under contract. We forget about Sean Davis, man. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent, so we can't trade him. I see so many comments. Let's re-sign Sean. For the people who do know that he's going to be a free agent, let's re-sign him and move Terrell Edmonds to dime backer. Okay, we're going to move Ryan Shazier back to safety too once we get him back on the field. Like, remember all those asinine arguments? It's just if you don't like the way Mark Barron plays, and I think he's done fine. Average to above average. I'm not expecting everybody to be a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro. There's plenty of other guys who fit that role. Ike Taylor talked about on this very program, Brian, maybe about a month ago, being surrounded by greatness. You could certainly get by. So you don't need everybody to be a superstar. But you can't trade guys who aren't under contract, and you're not going to get anything for them, even if they were. Like, somebody's going to – I'm trying to think of one of these other names that somebody brought up. There's people who are talking about trading Marquise Pouncey, man. I mean – I understand he had some low snaps. Some people say he's always been a low snap guy. Maybe Ben's just been used to it. Definitely a change at the quarterback position will – facilitate some sort of inconsistencies between an exchange between the center and the quarterback. That's just going to happen. It's just the same way that the quarterback may not have the same timing. And you see backup quarterbacks usually come in. Who are they usually better off with? Usually the guys they're practicing with, like the second and third string guys, or maybe just tight ends or running backs, because those are the dump off guys. They aren't making their progressions and reads. This is just the nature of the beast. So please do understand. I know we slip up on the show and we're not perfect, but I'm talking about there are people out there that make bona fide statements that are boneheaded statements. And I want to even say I saw one from one of these blogs. I was just like, ha ha, it was the Nelson off The Simpsons. Ha ha, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, this next one is my favorite, personally, my personal favorite, and a huge pet peeve of mine. Dumb mock drafts.
Wait, say that louder for
dumb mock drafts.
Say it louder for those in the back.
Stop drafting Jalen Hurts in the second round. Stop it.
Yeah.
You're not going to draft a quarterback. Stop.
I need to find. I'm going to see if I can find one of my guys here. I'm going to get you talking on a comment on one of these next ones, and I'm going to come back and find a dumb mock draft for you. How about wanting to fire every coach?
Well, I get it. That's
Todd Haley. He was the problem.
Fire Todd Haley. He's already gone. Yeah, apparently. Look, again, it's this. There's an unrealistic expectation. We've talked about this in the past. We're spoiled. We expect to win every year, even though. Look, the realistic end result of the Steelers winning the Super Bowl every single year would be that the NFL would go out of business because people would no longer care to watch except for Steelers fans. The rest of the teams, nobody would show up. They'd go, oh, who cares? So it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
They're not going to win every year. And they are going to have bad seasons. That's just the way it is. I get I understand the frustration when you think you have the talent to win every year, but that's the nature of playing games that can be contested by the individual performances of a variety of people. Somebody can just have a great game, and that's the way it works. The best teams don't always win.
We were here a year ago, and it was let's fire Keith Butler. Now it's let's fire Randy Fichtner. It's just it's never ending. Mike Tomlin's just the only the constant through all of this. I mean, what do you expect what do you expect to happen? I mean, I don't know. Not any change doesn't necessarily mean it's a good change. So,
well, plus they see what they think are dynamic changes on other teams because they hire this coach or that coach, and they're like, well, why can't we do those things? And look, I give Randy Fichtner a short leash this year, to a certain extent, and basically saying, I give him a pass to a certain extent for last year because, you lose your franchise quarterback. There's only so much you can do. But he needs to be a little more creative with that offense once he has the pieces to do it. I'm willing to give him another season to give it a shot. So I'm not sold on Randy Fichtner, but I'm not ready to dump him yet either because starting all over again is also a really bad idea.
Well, especially when you got, he's obviously, chums with your franchise quarterback and restarting from there. He threw for over 5,000 yards with this guy. Okay, he threw some picks too, but nobody was blaming Fichtner for that back then, right? So, I'm struggling to find one. I just remember there was one guy in particular that kept drafting for whatever reason multiple quarterbacks because that's what the Steelers need, and it was like Hurts or Jake Fromm or
I remember that one.
Well, it was also they also got they wanted the guy from Hawaii too. It was like a 7th rounder. I guess he'll be the next Tom Brady. Obviously, if he had to come in and spell Fromm or Hurts, he would be better than Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges, I suppose. So there's that. We were making fun of what we need to find is we should do some investigation here. Come back next week and find like old mock drafts from maybe 3-4 years ago where you could kind of really evaluate the talent and what everybody said about some of these picks. I guarantee you it'd be some great stuff. I still keep preseason football guides. I usually keep those. I get the Lindy's every year. And then the Sports Illustrated Fantasy Football and who they say. And there was a name that popped. I had one of these in my hand the other day. Here's a name you don't remember. This isn't a Steelers guy, but you remember Kevin Kolb? And he was supposed to come in and be the Philadelphia Eagles savior. I know you're closer out to that way. And then he just, I don't know if he got hurt, he stunk or whatever, and he went to Cardinals, and he wasn't any good there either. And it was like, this was a guy that was supposed to throw for 4,000 or 5,000 yards and the high-powered offenses and all this other stuff. So it's like, I understand it's predictions, it's fun, people get it wrong, but there's some people that really, really, plant their flag on some of this stuff.
Bucky Brooks.
There's one. There's a good one. It's just, oh man, it's so good. No, Brian, I'm scrolling through Facebook. I was scrolling through Twitter, and 90% of this is all like coronavirus. I can't find anything else. So I guess we'll have to find a dumb mock draft later. Wanting to fire every coach is always a great thing. Wanting to bring in more quarterbacks is always great. Let's talk about the one quarterback that we already got that we know is coming back. I think how excited would people be maybe? Let's say Roethlisberger was a free agent, like akin to Peyton Manning. Let's say he wasn't a Pittsburgh Steeler already. He amassed all these yards with some other team. I don't know, the Colts. Yeah, that is very Peyton Manning-esque, actually. But just anybody, and then all of a sudden he were available, and the Steelers might be linked to this. Everybody would be going insane because they're already going insane about Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady potentially being available. It's just so, but since he is a Steeler already and there's some animosity for whatever reason, people have some vitriol about Big Ben Roethlisberger. They think he's bigger Ben Roethlisberger and he's fat. Go look at some real photos. The guy is, if he's wearing a winter coat or a hoodie or something like that. And then obviously, the nickname there is he's Big Ben because he's always been big, but he's never been like this obese guy. It's so ridiculous. I don't even know where to begin or end with that other than what I just said.
Yeah, look, I get it. The beard doesn't help. I understand. That beard is Diesel-ish. It's Brett Kiesel level almost. That is a massive beard, and it does kind of make you think, oh, Ben's ginormous. What the heck? But it's hair. It's mostly hair. When you see him, look, do you expect him to be in the best shape? No, you don't. He's not been doing much. Do you expect him to be as thin as he might have been the last couple seasons coming in? No. Is he a giant, load? No, he's not.
Well, did you think he was this same size, maybe? Like, he's obviously been dieting. He hasn't been sitting there eating Cheetos and singing, "You can't touch this." Or no, that was Doritos. Why do I always get those confused? But maybe he's eating both. He has a big bowl of both. He's not doing any of that. So forget it. Like, and then, this is prime time. It's like March. You're going to have off-season workouts. And by the time you get to July, the guy may be like shredded and ripped. But, this is, I would say this is still kind of in the tail end of the recovery period, particularly when the Steelers were deep in the postseason. They're still playing at the end of January, almost beginning of February. Maybe he plays in a Pro Bowl, and he's only been off for like the last month or so. I wouldn't expect, it's kind of dumb, and I understand he might not be able to work out fully the way that he would like, but at the same time, I don't think he's not working out. You got to be doing something as an athlete to maintain the rest of your like lower body strength and things like that. And he's probably got, multiple personal trainers and things to that effect that he works with because he's a multi-million-dollar guy with the resources of a multi-million-dollar organization. Duh. Let's talk about another guy like that. And he, when he came back, from an injury, he really opened my eyes, and I thought he was very athletic and everything else. But there's so many people that are on the get rid of James Conner train. Wasn't this the guy that like barely played any snaps his rookie year that had one of the hottest selling NFL jerseys? It's amazing how people turn on these players. And I understand that Conner gets banged up. I don't think that Conner plans on getting injured, or he's not working hard enough to where he shouldn't be injury prone. We talked about Lamar Woodley, maybe bagging 2 lunches or whatever. Conner isn't that guy. Conner is just jacked, man. He's a physical specimen. I understand he had some things that happened in college. I mean, it was his ACL or MCL. He tore up his knee, and then he had the stronger than cancer or whatever you want. I hate bringing up cancer every time I bring up his name. I think it's just very lowbrow when it comes to him. He beat it. Okay, you know what? That's part of his story, but we're moving on. He's got other chapters to write still, and this is like a lot of people were like all over. Who all said this in the Steelers staff? Was this Colbert's recent call? I think was that who we recently heard, or was it Art Rooney the second? I can't remember which one.
Colbert was the last one we heard.
It may have been both that said that they were confident in him, and why not? He's still under a rookie deal for a 4th year. There's absolutely no risk or reason to say, oh, well, they're gonna trade him or whatever. The next team isn't going to give up. This guy was a 3rd round pick, compensatory pick too, I believe, right? Late 3rd round pick, and who's going to give that up? Like, they're not giving up anything larger than that to get a guy that, hey, why is this team getting rid of him? Maybe he's injury prone. So that means he won't be playing for us either. Oh, hey, here's a 1st-round draft pick. Take whoever else you want. Here's Saquon Barkley. We'll just do an even trade. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, come on. It doesn't work that way. And I'm kind of tired of seeing the injury-prone thing with him, too. I know he missed a lot of games last year, and he was struggling. It's another thing where he's trying to come back and help his team, and then he just ends up suffering another injury. And it's not unlike other players we've seen do the same in the past. And if you'll remember, Brian, Le'Veon Bell had the same stamp on him for the longest time too.
Yeah, the difference in my mind, look, I don't want to say that Conner is injury prone, but I will say this: the style of play in which he flourishes is conducive to getting beat up. That's the kind of runner he is. Now, does that mean he's going to have devastating injuries or injuries that keep him out multiple games all the time? No. But is he probably going to play a 16-game season? Maybe not. He's probably going to get some dings here and there. But here's the thing. For those of you who are all like, well, get rid of him now, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Look, he's got one more year on his rookie contract. What are you going to do? Look, I've been JK all day in a lot of these mock drafts, right? I keep pulling for the idea of getting a stud running back. But it's not because I think Connor should be gone. It's because I think the room could use it. And if we have it, and Connor is there to let the new guy, to share the load, so to speak, why wouldn't you do that? Yes, he will probably not get another contract from the Steelers at the end of this season. It's at this point, that's more likely than not. He would have to have a stellar year for them to find a reason to offer him something. And if he does, it's probably now going to come to the point where they wouldn't be able to, they wouldn't want to invest that kind of money. The likelihood that James Conner is gone after this season, unless he takes a real discount, is high. But why get rid of him now? There's just no point in it. And, when he is healthy, he is a good running back.
Well, I mean, yeah. Not only when he's healthy, he's a good running back, but there's other guys there who could already shoulder the load. I'm not, like I said, I wasn't looking to push people out of that room or off the depth chart there. And I think there's some other big glowing, what do you want to say, things that were missing. What's that? What was
Needs, issues?
No,
Needs.
Roosevelt Nix wasn't there last year. He was hurt.
That's true.
That's a big part of the running game, man. They didn't have a fullback. And that hurt the running game immensely. That's why I'm not even as down on that. I understand Nix doesn't play a ton of snaps sometimes, but he offers something different in a sub-package and a different look that is another wrinkle to the offense, and that's a huge deal, especially when he was a Pro Bowl fullback himself just like a year or so removed also from this past injured reserve season. So that could help Connor. Hey, the running back thing, if you want to draft a running back, I'm not out there like saying it's a tremendous need. We both said that. But the Steelers, if they can improve at any position, most positions, I don't think you're going to improve on the quarterback position based on their position. I keep saying that word. In the draft. They're in the second round. And we did a show probably, was it last year or maybe the year before? We always revisit the first round quarterbacks and how everything isn't surefire. And there are very few that are taken outside of the first round. If you look at the success and failure rate of quarterbacks taken in the first round, it's like almost like a coin flip sometimes. When you look outside of the first round, it's worse. There are very few guys that end up going second and third round that end up making it. I can name some exceptions right now. If you think that they're fantastic quarterbacks or not, that's up to you to do your homework. Jimmy Garoppolo, Derek Carr, Russell Wilson, I think is a tremendous exception to that rule. Dak Prescott. Okay, that's what you're going to end up getting, so don't, whine and complain if that's what the Steelers end up doing. Oh, they already did that. There was a third-round pick on Mason Rudolph. My bad. So it's just da-da-da-da-da. It just drives me crazy, man. And you know what else is crazy when we're talking draft stuff is now all of a sudden it's every single person that, well, they won't be meeting with anybody anytime soon, but anybody they interview, anybody they meet with, anyone they have a dinner with, which there's a little bit more legitimacy to the dinner deal. We all thought it was going to be Chase Winovich. Looks like they were actually just trying to pick Chase's brain about Devin Bush and maybe the other Harbaugh too. Although there isn't much to pick. He hasn't had much of a brain. But that was so cold of me. I'm so sorry. But it is that university up north. Sorry, Michigan fans.
Okay.
So
no, you said it.
I did it. I did it. It's worse than the coronavirus. Anyways, we have yet to get any hate mail over that, by the way, because I know there's a lot of other, looking in the region. It's most of the people that are in that area and being Pittsburgh Steelers fans are primarily Ohio State, Penn State, and West Virginia as far as your big Division I program. So we have yet to really receive any other hate mail because guess what? They don't like that university up north either. So it's quite all right. And, we forgive the guys. Once they become Pittsburgh Steelers, we, disavow all knowledge of their past history. It's kind of like when the Ravens, the Browns moved to Baltimore and became the Ravens, and they had to give up that whole history. It's the same thing when you come to Pittsburgh and you went to college at Gesundheit. I'll have to get myself checked. I'm feeling ill from saying something like that again, or almost. So anyways, when they go and they have these pro days, they have these interviews, they have all of these, psychological tests and every other thing that they do, or, they end up sending Mike Tomlin or Kevin Colbert to a pro day and they're watching somebody. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily 100% interested in them, and they're doing their due diligence. And you know what? This is the other thing where the Steelers, this goes back to firing coaches and staff and things of that nature. When you have this kind of organization, when you have the kind of staff and support that you've had that have been together for many years, they could build upon all of their notes that they have kept. So what ends up happening is that 4 years later, a guy like Steven Nelson ends up becoming a free agent, and it's someone that they looked at and they were interested in when he came out of college. It didn't work out. And now, not only that, they've seen his pro film, they've seen how he's turned out, and they offer the guy a contract. Or conversely, you get somebody that, they have some intimate knowledge about, or they see in these preseason games. We bring this up a lot often too, like Alejandro Villanueva or Zach Banner or your other, giant behemoths that Mike Tomlin seems to fall in love with. They have several of them on the team. Dan McCullers is another one, But this happens quite frequently. I want to say Rosie Nix was a guy that played against them when he was maybe on the Falcons roster, and they saw potential and they changed position. Maybe they're using that guy wrong, is what they think, and that's what they thought. And they've gotten production out of guys like Nix, Villanueva, Banner. So there's things like that happen too. This is all part of that process right now. And this also has to deal with, there's guys that are going to go and be undrafted, that are going to be college free agents, or you're going to bring them in for a rookie camp. They're not all going to be local guys. And that's how someone like Duck Hodges ends up making the roster too. You do your due diligence this time of year. It doesn't necessarily mean that person's going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler right away, but they could be in the future. Also helps you, kind of scout for game days and your opponent as well.
Yeah, look, I think Mike Tomlin does a great job, and Kevin Colbert as well, of not just targeting the players that they think are going to be in range, but targeting the players that they think could go to teams in the division. They think could go to teams where they might have the opportunity, like they did with Minkah Fitzpatrick, to pick them up later. They like to have knowledge of players that they think could help the team, regardless of whether they think they could help the team in this particular draft or if there's somebody they need to go after down the road. I think they do a fantastic job of dealing with that, and that's great, but it does, as you said, it doesn't mean that every single guy they talk to is on their target board, because they talk to people that they absolutely know they're going to have no shot at drafting.
Yeah.
And the idea that they're going to is ludicrous. There is some legitimacy to saying, pay attention to where they go. And that could be up in the air this year with the whole coronavirus thing if they don't go as many places. But there's been in the past a good, solid history of the guys they draft, they've had some contact with. And that's, so it is good to pay attention, but don't make the assumption that whoever they talk to is definitely the guy. Because then you end up like Eric and Zaccadonia crying in your milk because Chase Winovich is a Patriot.
Well, I was still crying in my milk over that. The guy went in the third round. It's just, he was still sitting there, and I'm like, what is going on? And then that happened with my boy Derek Rivers too, man. I mean,
yes, it did.
Have my favorites, and they keep going to that vile place. By the way, I found a bad mock draft.
Yeah.
What were we just talking about? That the guy from Georgia, Jake Fromm.
Okay, Jake Fromm.
There he is, man. Second round at the top of this. Alex Highsmith, edge from Charlotte. And then I guess we're going to go with Antonio Gandy Golden from Liberty. So, I mean, we're going with some small school guys, which is totally against, what the Steelers really do.
Not in the upper rounds.
No, not. I don't think you're not looking at them before the sixth. I don't think in most cases.
Yep.
That is just totally against what they do. And, it's why we've been on some people. There was the whole, is it Adam Troutman? I forget his first name now, from Dayton. And I'm like, Dayton, an FCS school, he might have the tools and stuff. There was all that stuff about Shaheen that went to the Bears a few years ago from Division II Ashland. And, there's some credence to that. Mike Tomlin has come straight out and said, there's only so many schools where guys are pro ready, and it's usually a few from the Big Ten. We've mentioned those already. Some, in the SEC, maybe an ACC school here or there. It's tough to throw a guy in there. Javon Hargrave is like a very, what do you want to say, a major rare exception to the rule there, maybe.
Yep, absolutely.
There's a guard here, John Runyon from Michigan. This is a very deep draft for guards. That's a fourth rounder. Another edge guy from Minnesota, Carter Coughlin in the sixth, and Benito Jones, a defensive lineman from Mississippi in the seventh. And it's like, okay, well, you're throwing a dart at that guy. I mean, it's like if they're there and they're draftable and it's something like that, okay. But doubling up on the edge, just that could happen if Bud Dupree doesn't come back. I don't know that I necessarily. I don't know. I'm not going to take a quarterback over a need necessarily if there's somebody better available there in the second. So it's kind of crazy, and you see some of the other stuff that ends up coming around. Actually, it's not the most terrible one, but the guy did another one. It's Denzel Mims, Highsmith again, Runyon a pick earlier, and then went back around and got Thaddeus Moss in the fourth. A linebacker from LSU, Michael Divinity Jr., and T.J. McCoy, a center from Louisville. Hey, there's a little more logic behind that one. I'll have to give him some credit. So for every bad mock draft, maybe there may be a silver lining. I don't know.
Yeah, look, if I'm going to mock your mock draft, it's because of probably the first 2 or 3 picks.
Yeah.
I don't care who you pick in the third, late third, and the fourth round and beyond. I don't care. You're throwing darts in all those lower rounds. But you got to have some legitimacy to the choices you make in the top few rounds. I can live with guys saying they're going to pick an edge guy in the first round if the reason they're saying that is, or in the second round, if the reason they're saying that is because Bud Dupree's gone. Then it makes sense, and we've said that repeatedly. It's very likely then. But don't tell me, and this is directed at another NFL analyst, I can't remember, or Reuter, on the NFL.com, that old NFL.com intraweb. Stop telling me they're going to pick Jalen Hurts. They're not going to pick Jalen Hurts. I don't care what round it is.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, I could see some of the, there's some decent ones here or there when I see Cam Akers or maybe Chase Claypool or something like that. That tends to make a little more sense to me. But every one of these where I see Jalen Hurts, Jake Fromm, and stuff of that nature, it's just it starts to unnerve me. So those are our pet peeves. Unless you have some more. Oh, I got one more for you, Brian. What do you think about Jonathan Taylor? Since we're on the whole running back and mock draft deal.
Look, you cannot deny the talent that Jonathan Taylor has, but 900 carries.
Thank you.
In college.
Thank you.
I can't do it, man. Look, running backs have a limited amount of tread. We all know it. That's just a ton of tread being worn off those tires. I can't do it, man.
Nope, I'm on board with you. So aside from mock drafts coming out in November, we can't really make fun of those at the moment. So you don't even know who's picking where at that time, and people are already trying to predict where things are going to end for the season and things of that nature too. And it's just like, oh man, oh lordy, as my mom might say. So Brian, thanks for joining me once again today, and I think we pretty much kept our cool, and I think we're going to be looking at, we had some pet peeves here, but there's some burning questions. I think we're going to be doing burning questions next. So we before I kick it over to you one last time, folks, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and send us your burning questions. We could get them via email, we could get them via text, you could shoot us messages or add us on Twitter, maybe Instagram. I might not see it as easily on Instagram. We might miss that one easily, but Facebook too. Send some stuff our way, and we'll try and get yours. And by all means, if you end up sending it and 5 other people did, don't feel slighted. It just means that somebody may have beaten you to the punch.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a pleasure to join you, my friend. And I look forward to neither one of us going into isolation.
Yeah, well, I'm already in isolation, so it won't matter. Sad face. So, but anyways, you'll just be in the Steelers man cave, so I'm sure you'll be happier than a pig, and you know what?
Absolutely correct.
Will not affect you one way or the other. Maybe a stiffly nose at the worst. So, for everyone out there, we're always telling you to be safe and be good, and we'll catch you later. But also be careful. We don't want to find out the worst news from any of our listeners. So just the PSA, go and look at that. Go look out there. I've never been a big germaphobe, but I've always been into like hand sanitizer and washing my hands and just, being careful and mindful of my surroundings. So we encourage you to do the same. Be careful out there. And sincerely, we do mean it. And we will hopefully catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.